Hello, everyone, and welcome to a special version of the stories that brought you here. I'm your host, Chris Wakaluk, and if you are a regular listener to this, welcome. I haven't been doing any podcasts lately, and I think you might know the reason for that. And that is, of course, the special circumstances that we are existing in for the last few months. So, the reason I haven't done any podcasts is never mind the social distancing, but the idea of asking somebody to reflect on their lives when in March and April, the uncertainty of what was going to happen the next day or the next week was very high. It just didn't seem appropriate to ask people to do a podcast at that time. As those months unfolded and the strangeness was pretty deep, I spent a lot of time talking on the phone to people. I called up people just in search of connection. Doing the podcast has actually been a really meaningful portion of my life for the last couple of years. And I really missed having the opportunity to have those conversations with people. So, being stuck at home after being laid off work, I made a lot of phone calls and I was reaching out to people from all different parts of my life, from the present and the past. Sometimes I was making 5 calls a day. Talked to my mom a lot during that time as well too on the phone, and it was so nice to connect and share with people and get to hear what people's experiences were and get to share what my experiences were. And without exception, every phone call I had during that time just left me feeling better. And there was always some amazing nugget that I was left with from the person I spoke to, that everybody had a different feeling or opinion or view on what the situation was. And I found that to be really encouraging. And whether or not I agreed fully with what the person was saying, I was so thankful to hear some different perspectives and to get to share with people. So, as we've entered into June and things have relaxed a little bit with getting together with people, I started to process what I wanted to do in order to get back into podcasts and audio recordings. And I feel like I'm a bit of a different person from who I was before this started. And this new person that I've transitioned into feels very adamantly about doing things that I think are important. Something that I think is important right now is for us to hear voices of people on Pender, the island that we live on, and get to hear what people's experiences have been and are during these times that we're existing in. So I came up with the idea of doing a compilation podcast where I would interview people and extract myself out of the final edit and just have it in the interviewee's voice. And the interviewees would be answering 4 questions. The first question is, where have you been putting your love? So during this time, where have people been putting their energy and their loving energy towards? And what are the positive outcomes that have come from this situation through people's actions? The second question is, what are the significant challenges that you've had to face during this time? I think there's so many different issues and challenges that people have had to face. And I'm really interested in hearing what those are and having people express that and sharing that as a community and understanding what people have been going through as families, as individuals, and what the similarities and differences are within that. The third question is, what is your dream for the future? And the reason for this is because I've been quite optimistic through this period. And I have a lot of things that I'm dreaming of that I'd like to see happen. And I think focusing on the things that we would like to see happen and using our energy moving towards those directions is really powerful. And I would really like to get to hear as to what people's dream is of the reality that they want to exist in going forward. The fourth and final question is basically an open question for the interviewee to come up with on their own and ask of themselves. So, this question I think is really important because we are all creative beings. We all have the capacity to ask some very amazing questions. And there's nothing really like a great question. So I wanted to put it in people's court to come up with something unique to them that's meaningful to them to share and to challenge themselves with. So that's an explanation as to what you're going to hear. I went looking for people on Facebook initially. I put a post out on the Stories That Brought You Here homepage and heard back from one person after writing a lengthy post explaining what I'd want to do. And then I reached out to a few more people. And luckily, I had a few people in my life who wanted to open up and share. And what I asked of these individuals is that they dig a little deep and truly try to express themselves to share something meaningful in this. And they did. It's pretty great. So you're going to get to hear the voices of Emma Kale, Matthew DeRoche, Nikki Roberts, and Paul Wittershoven coming up here. All these interviews were conducted outdoors at various locations. So you're going to get to hear the background noise of airplanes, cars, ocean waves, wind chimes, dogs. And I think there's a few other things in there as well too. Oh yeah, a generator at one point because the power went out when I was recording. So all that good stuff is going to be in the background, which I actually really, really enjoy hearing. Oh yeah, right. Birds. A lot of bird activity in the background. So I really hope you enjoy what you get to listen to here. Thank you for listening to this rather lengthy intro. And we'll see you guys on the other side of this, what I'm titling Our Unique Times, Volume 1.
My name is Emma Kale. I've been putting my love in different places than pre-COVID. So essentially in my personal space, I've been spending a lot more time with my partner, not spending as much time obviously physically with people, but spending a lot more time virtually with people. And interestingly, the word love is not usually applied to business, right? Like usually business is about business. There's no love involved, no love lost, like expressions like that, right? And I've actually been working on developing a really strong business community, which is like from all over, because I joined a kind of like a professional association, and the members are spread out all over the world. So I've been spending a lot of time basically like talking to people that I don't know and having like really great, open, friendly, meaningful conversations that like move all over the place. They're sort of grounded in business, but they're moving all over the place. And I thought to myself the other day, I just had one yesterday, and I thought, I'm actually like developing affection for this experience and affection for these people, right? And it's a different experience that I think brought everyone virtually together and also gave everybody an appreciation of, how blessed we are to have the ability to speak to anyone we want to anywhere in the world at any time. That's really brought that home for me, and I've really enjoyed that part. I have not enjoyed COVID at all. I've not enjoyed the experience of all the tragedy that people losing their lives and everything like that. But in terms of like what it's actually done for me and like how many people have come into my life as a result, I've really been blessed. This is, I guess, the point I'm trying to make is that I think I'm way more community focused as a result, right? I wouldn't have called myself particularly community focused. I tend to be, I'm focused on like my personal space, taking care of my people in my immediate vicinity, and then taking care of the business responsibilities that I have that I'm accountable for. Obviously, I expand as I expand, but I mean, I think I just made a concerted effort that I probably wouldn't have done if I hadn't been so limited, right? Like COVID really like brought us all into a very tight space, like we can't go here, we can't go there, we can't go there. So how do we adapt? And how do we kind of spread that caring, spread that love when we can't actually physically do it or see each other or be with each other? All the events that got canceled, for example, right? Typically, I mean, pre-COVID, I would have probably just gone to an event like in Seattle or California or Toronto or somewhere, right? Probably just would have gone to a big community event, met everybody, made some friends, come back home. Kept in contact with a few, but probably nowhere near as many as I brought on board since March. And I always used to think that that wasn't possible, right? I really used to believe that you had to have the face to face in order to make a connection with another human being. But I have proved myself totally wrong. Totally wrong. I have been challenged a lot with the protocols. I've been challenged a lot with social distancing, especially. I really missed hugging people, like profoundly missed it, almost to the point where I said to Al, I was like, I really miss hugs, right? Like I really miss hugs. And that's been a challenge for me because Pender Island is a small community. I mean, I have a lot of friends here. Usually every time we get together, we like bear hug each other, right? And I didn't get a hug from anybody for almost 4 months. And I really felt starved. Like, and that was a major challenge for me. And it was really challenging for me just to not go over to people's house anymore and not have people over here. You know, we weren't able to go to the disc park. I didn't go disc golfing for 3 months. Like these sound like first world problems as they're coming out of my mouth, but you know what I mean? But it's interesting when you're suddenly bereft of human contact. It made me understand like how important that is to me. And I profoundly missed it. Yeah. Because humans, I mean, I'm a human and I need other humans. And this whole experience with COVID has made that so apparent to me. This is one thing. This whole planet, all the people, everybody who's here, it's one, you know? Everything's connected. Everybody's connected. And I don't mean that in the new agey sense. Like it's literal, you know? Everything's connected. Everything is connected. Yeah. I think my dream, and I'm actually seeing it on social media. I'm seeing parts of it coming together. I don't know if it's going to manifest fully. There's a lot of barriers to having it manifest fully, but I think my dream is, you know, we're all more similar than different. And that this experience has shown us that there's no gender, there's no race, there's no age. All that is superfluous crap, right? Everybody has a kind of core oneness. And I mean, we've seen coming out of COVID, we've seen like, you know, major stuff going on in the US, like, you know, they're understanding. I think a lot of people are coming to terms with the fact that, you know, their system is rigged, always has been rigged. They need to really look at how they treat people who are not white. And it could very much go back to the way it is. Once all the protocols are lifted and things kind of continue forward, it could all go back to the way it is. But I mean, I think the fact that people are waking up to that is really promising as far as I'm concerned. Because all of these things that people are believe are there, that are real, are not. It's the social world telling us that there's these differences, and the differences are there for usually economic reasons. As far as I'm concerned, it's all made up. I think it starts with like people understanding again that they have way more in common than they could ever imagine. You know, say if we look at people, like looking at the difference between physical differences between people. You're old, or you're black, or you're female, or whatever. What are we actually talking about? We're talking about probably like, you know, 5 or 6 or maybe 10 real fundamental differences, right? I don't know, like pigmentation, for example, or like internal plumbing, right? Sex organs, differences, Adam's apple, no Adam's apple. You know, like small little physical differences that people like blow into these massive, oh, then okay, then this makes everything different. It's like, well, what about all the things we have in common? Like hearts, lungs, bones, dreams, visions, love, right? All these things that so many people have in common. It's like, well, let's focus on what we have in common. How about that for a change? Because I mean, I think for me, understanding underscores everything, right? Fundamentally, what is your understanding going forward in the world, right? What do you understand about yourself? What do you understand about each other? And if that shifts, like if that changes, that's a new world. The human civilization has never been like that. It's always been sort of built on divisions, divisiveness, right? Differences. What would it look like if it was built on similarities? Totally different, right? Unrecognizable. Most of the stuff would probably just fall away. Like we wouldn't even bother with it anymore. You know? I think my question, which is a question I ask myself more so now as a result of COVID, what are the differences? What are the differences between people and why do they matter? And how do we shift that to move to not even ask them in the first place? If we go to each other expecting a particular answer, then essentially that would mean that we're always in a state of projection, right? Because if we formulated a question and we're looking for a particular answer, that's about me, right? That's me saying, okay, here's my question. Here's the answer I'm looking for. So the other person isn't really involved in that situation. I'm basically just projecting. And they're going to give me an answer, but it's still an answer that I've come up with. So what if we turn that around? It would be interesting to start to ask these really deep questions about basically like how we operate as people. Like really fundamental. How do we operate? Why do we project all of this onto each other? Why do we operate from a place of difference as opposed to similarity? Why are most of our societal structures in place to separate? Or you'll just be going with the answers you've already been given, right? And just continuing forward, right? I think it's always important to go back to the initial inquiry, right? Like go back to the first question and say, is this the right question? Like instead of, for example, like, is the universe an answer or is it a question? I love those big flips like that, right? When you kind of go back to like, oh, instead of door A, let's try door B. We're not usually encouraged to have these kind of conversations or have these sort of self-inquiry moments, right? Like we're encouraged to, get a job, make as much money as possible, buy a bunch of stuff and then retire or not, right? And everything is kind of geared towards basically acquisition of acquisition of people, acquisition of stuff, acquisition of land, acquisition of money, whatever. Everything is, and that's important. That's one part of life that, I don't deny that to anybody. That's a very important part of life, but it's not all that life is. It's one part, There's a whole bunch of other shit going on, but most of us are not encouraged to explore that, right? Or if we are, we kind of like pull ourselves out of it really quickly because it's too esoteric and it's not necessarily going to have, not going to impact the bottom line of our lives, But this is how you grow. Like conversations like this, thoughts like this is how you grow. This is how you change.
My name is Matthew DeRoche, and my wife and I and our little son Phoenix live on Pender Island here. It'll be 9 years this fall. So during this current context we find ourselves within, the climate of the coronavirus, it has been a shift for myself, one that found a few things changing, and one of them is definitely where I put my love. Prior to this, I had a very extroverted relationship with the community and with part of the public scene and part of an extroverted or external sort of experience of myself. Not a lot of alone time, not a lot of quiet time, not a lot of downtime. So a lot of my energy and focus could be close to synonymous with love. Where are you putting your time and your energy? Was in how can we work, gather, and serve the community from that platform. So it's been a major shift in the last few months. I find myself putting my love in my family mostly. So it's been a huge blessing to have so much time that we spend in the garden. Phoenix has got his own little garden bed, and he's thrilled to find beans and strawberries. And, we get to watch the plants grow. And the fruit of that is still being seen both in them and in myself. So in all of our relationships and in me personally. But there's a further shift after that. So I started to realize I just had a lot of triggers of anxiety and anger, probably as fallout from having such an extroverted, high pace, low sleep cycle for a while there, that this actually gave me an opportunity to breathe and to start to become aware of some of these things that were affecting me in negative ways versus the things that were actually healthy for me. So I started to make a shift of putting my love, obviously continuing to love my wife and my son and the garden and those things when engaged with them, but more focused back on myself. I started reading again and started to have more quiet time, more prayer time and contemplation time. And it has led to some amazing insights. And, I'm not one to attest to whether there's been healing or change, but it's been interesting to see as I pour love back in myself through this self-discovery process and awareness, which is familiar to me prior to, doing the gather dance. It was really familiar to me. It was part of my daily dialogue and daily life was the inner experience. And so there's even been a further shift where now pouring the love in, it actually somehow spills out. It's like the world has become alive again. The trees have become saturated with life, and the birds are just far more colorful or luminous or just alive. The whole world seems more alive. And now whether that's a reflection of, the living waters pouring in me again and out of me, and so I'm projecting that life that I feel inside, or whether that I finally, cleaned up my house inside, and now I can appreciate outside without having walls built around my eyes. So it's been an interesting process, one that's been multi-stage, and I'm sure not over yet. And with the, the coming reemergence into daily life of some normalcy, whatever that looks like, I'm sure there'll be, again, shifts on how that will look. Some of the challenges that have come up have been hard, although in a way easier. I think that I found the challenges prior to the COVID climate to be harder to overcome only because they found themselves really woven into a communal context. So now that it's more family, the dynamics are less. I feel I have more control over the challenges in some way. We've been blessed that I've been able to continue working in the trades. So we've been okay with money and we're not in debt. So I feel there's no financial burden or pressure that has come with this experience. If anything, maybe the opposite. There's been a liberation from some of the financial demands and stresses that came with Gather. So that's been great. But some of the challenges have definitely been more, well, I alluded to them in where I put my love. I think the challenges have been coming to terms with myself and my behaviors. I think it is way too easy to just blame other people or institutions or blame external factors, mostly other people, for our problems. And, I will continue to do that until such point as I'm probably dead, but I'm doing my best not to. I mean, no matter what, I keep finding an opportunity for myself to look at myself. And it is both the hardest and most distasteful and most heart-squeezing of things to do. There's been many hard to get to sleep nights where, maybe through this period of solace, maybe it's part of a collective thing where, my soul is now rested in a calm sea and the collective is calm. So maybe in a way, all the quietness and stillness that's come out of this globally and psychically has actually shaken up some of these little nuggets of regret and sorrow and the people I've hurt and the times I've been hurt from my past. So it's been almost through this calm water, these bubbles are emerging from deep in my psyche and my unconscious that are demanding my attention. And some of them are so hard to look at and so hard to feel. Well, I mean, without the stability of my family, my wife, I think it would be almost impossible. I would probably revert to my old tech paths of just running away, hopping in the truck and driving across Canada or going on some big trip and escaping. Of course, taking myself with me the whole way. But I think having to stay here and stay rooted through it and try to remain aware and stare at the hard parts and the problems, that's been the hardest part. It's also been the most rewarding. I keep saying to myself, I did most of this damage cumulatively, so I can't expect immediate relief through any one technique. So I'm trying to see it as building new healthy behaviors and patterns and routines that can alleviate some of the pain that comes with reflecting on the crappy things that one does in their life. I think my dream of the future would spill out of my family. I mean, I have been more than ever recently. Like, I have taken, maybe 15, 20 years break from news, no TV. When I was on social media, I would find a lot of the current events globally happening, find out about them there, or my workmate Danny would always bring me up to speed with things that were important or relevant. Now being on the news all the time, which I should probably stop. That cycle has probably played out. I think we've gotten to the point where we're repeating things again. My mind is very much aware of the political context of both our own country and, of course, America, and then within the broader global context of relationships between nations and dynamics of left versus right. So, future immediately for me conjures a broader global context and the challenge that we're faced with as a species on this planet, and the challenge as we're faced with as caretakers and stewards of this environment. It's huge. It's absolutely phenomenal. We stand at the crossroads yet again, and this time we've all depressed the reset button collectively, and we will be forging ahead. So, the question of what do I see as a future vision? Well, I would like to step back from that global perspective and step away from the dynamics of polarization and everything. And I would think that my future vision really stands on the shoulders of the nuclear family, of partners together, with or without children, and the value and honesty that we can live with in the initial, smallest, like the lowest resolution of relationship dynamic, the lowest resolution of community, the lowest resolution of society is that super small family unit. I think that's where I would hope that we can see values being placed on that we can see decisions and priorities being based using that as a foundational grounds. So I would want to see children being valued and not indoctrinated. I want to see families being put ahead of corporations. I would love to see, there's so many opportunities. We live in such a rich infrastructure. Never before in any other empire on the face of this planet have human beings, especially us in the West, lived in such a rich, opportunity-filled infrastructure that, as individuals we can connect into it, as communities we can draw from it, as a whole nation we can guide so much. So, where are the grants for decentralizing energy production? Where are the grants for water collection? Where are the grants for grassroots education? Where are the grants for expanding our awareness of ourself? Like, I would love to see diverting funds on a political and national level from military spending and bureaucratic spending, just throwing it out there. Maybe instead of these ludicrously long pensions for politicians, we divert some of those funds into families that are actually struggling to survive, into, some of the corners of the country that seldom get seen, into indigenous communities, into impoverished neighborhoods, and families that would be given a hand up, not just by money, but by education and by support and by stewardship and guidance. Free speech as an absolute cornerstone of our local, national, and global community, and values education and critical thinking. I don't know what it looks like. Ultimately, I'm an optimist, but I think that to get where we want to go, things are going to get worse before we get there. So it's an optimist with a pessimistic twist on the immediate future, I think. something in me shifted not too long ago. Well, I think it was about 5 years ago now. Within 2 years, most of my grandparents passed away. And at the same time, my son was born. So something in me shifted. I watched my dad become a grandfather. I watched the grandson become a father. I watched my grandparents fade. So it was like a giant generational wheel had just clicked one cog over. And I felt that thrust. And I think from that new position on the wheel, I was given a new perspective into my life, but into life in general. And it became a longer view. It's from climbing up that wheel, I could see further instead of being so immersed in the immediate, especially in regards to gratifying my immediate needs versus seeing and gratifying my longer out in time needs. I think more in a generational context. So, I'm constantly thinking about what Phoenix is going to live through. And as an 80-year-old, what world will I find myself in? So when it comes to asking questions, it is absolutely one of my favorite things. And I think asking questions leads us to a far greater wisdom than getting answers ever could. So the ability to render a complex problem or a simple problem or a penetrating problem into an articulate question that actually distills the problem. If you can distill a giant complex problem into a question, you have done so much of the hard work. And my favorite questions don't have pretty answers inside of lines and walls. My favorite questions draw me into a dynamic where I am now part of a process. I'm on an arc of experience. You're in the river or the journey or whatever metaphor springs to mind. My favorite question that I ask myself all the time is, how can I do better? When Phoenix was born, Sherry's auntie, who became by proxy my auntie Jean, she gave us one of the best pieces of advice, and it was, when you know better, you do better. And so many times I have been faced with regret in all aspects of my life, but to keep the metaphor consistent with raising and being a father and raising Phoenix, man, there's so many deep, hard regrets that only because he is a beautiful, fluid, loving creature are they easy to forget. But Auntie Jean's comment on when you know better, you do better is just such a relevant insight into pointing you as a parent to constantly try to grow and constantly try to do better. And there's no bottom on that, or rather there's no ceiling. As you learn, you do better. And as you make the same mistake 10 times, you are strengthening yourself to not make it the 11th time. So I like to frame it loosely. How can I do better? Might mean, how can I not anger so quickly? How can I listen better? There's so many opportunities to be better and do better. And I don't ever want to sit back and say that I'm good and I'm done and I've got it figured out or I'm good enough. I think those are ways of avoiding the only opportunity we have to be engaged with life itself. So how can I do better is my simple way of entering into the life of an acorn to an oak tree.
My name is Nikki Roberts. I've been putting my love, it would definitely be into our family and into our house and into the garden, into myself, into our marriage. And it feels really good. It feels like taking some of the things out that we do a lot of driving kids to programs and organizing things has slowed down because there's less happening. And so we're really spending a lot of time around here and enjoying it. And it's the best year we've had in the garden. We rearranged the furniture in our living room so that we could look out the living room window and watch the bird feeder. We've noticed a lot more birds. We've got all the games on the coffee table now, so we're spending a lot of time together as a family playing games, coming out here in the garden and weeding the path and planting vegetables and planting flowers. And we just planted a magnolia tree, and we're so excited about it. It feels like symbolic of excitement about a new chapter in our life, a time to really appreciate where we are and be thankful, and to watch things grow. Getting out for a run and listening to really good music and feeling positive about it. And just started running last year at 43, and I'm not very good at it, but I'm like, I'm out here. I'm going to give it a go. I'm going to try. I'm going to try to be as healthy as I can be, and I'm going to have faith that if I just keep at it, eventually I'll get better at it, and it won't be as hard as it is right now. And in terms of cooking, like often it's been a chore, but now I'm trying to do something extra and put some extra love into it. And so the other day when I made dinner, I made crepes, and I had picked up the fresh strawberries from Mitchell's in Saanich and a whole flat of them, and they were just ripening beyond anything right before our eyes, and just slicing them up and adding some chopped chocolate to it, and having like this amazing seasonal crepe. And we all took the time, we were all eating together, Stephen and the kids and I, and really in the moment. And I feel like we've had so many moments in the last few months that have been special just because we're paying attention, and we've really, really gotten a lot out of that. Having a cup of tea, in the garden and smelling the roses, we're like, wow, we've been planting all these things for the last few years, but we haven't been looking at them and appreciating them. I mean, some things have shifted. My mom passed away on May 16th, and I was definitely spending a lot of time taking care of my mom and spending a lot of my energy worrying about my mom. So even when I was home, I wasn't that present. I was concerned about getting a phone call that she had fallen, or worrying about what I could do for her. So that is time that I didn't have before, and energy, because the energy that happens when you lose somebody you love is a big energy and a strong energy. So I think there's been more energy to put into our life around here. And Stephen hasn't been going to work off island. He's been working from home. So taking the commute out of our family equation definitely freed up some time too. Having the kids home, they are usually in school and we're doing our thing. We're working and taking care of the house and all that. So with having them home, it's been really fun because they're interesting and they're good company and we've been doing things together. But they also need to be getting an education. And so trying to sort out what they should be learning, they need some structure to their day. They need some activities. They have to be learning something. They have to exercise. So, teachers do a great job of that. And trying to take on that role ourselves had mixed reviews, some things great and some things not so good. Yeah, and the other challenge was having somebody in our family that was really ill during COVID, and everything is different. So, when my mom went into the hospital, you could only have one family member in the hospital room at a time per day and for a limited amount of time. And so that experience was really different than what it would be during other times, in that I was in my mom's room and my dad and my brother were outside the hospital, but they could see through the window. And so they're saying their last words to her on a cell phone, and I'm holding it up to her ear. And she was unconscious or she was not responding at that point, but she could still hear what was being said. And so it was a very different way to say goodbye to somebody. And I think it was definitely her time. She chose it and she said, I'm done. That's it. And that was on May 14th. And 2 days later, she passed away. But that was all in the middle of COVID. So there was special challenges with a death in the family during COVID. And when somebody's ill for a long time and they're ready to go, you're glad for them to be relieved of their struggle and their pain. And so I'm happy for her that she doesn't have to deal with that anymore. But it was just different because of how the world is right now. When I met the doctor in the palliative care, I just stuck my hand out to shake his hand immediately. And he was a kind person and he shook my hand. But, that's not what we're doing now. We're not shaking hands and we're not being close to anybody. So it's funny to be physically distancing during a time like that, a big transition in life like that. The nurse in palliative said, she said it's so hard for them because they have to limit the time that family gets to spend together, and they have to restrict the number of people that can be there, and that has made their job a lot more challenging. And they have to follow all the new protocols in terms of extra sanitation and distancing themselves from the patients. I dream that the world becomes better. I think it's becoming better all the time, and I think that people have a better standard of living and people are able to be more compassionate than they've ever been in history before, because they're comfortable and because they're not afraid for their lives. A lot of people are not. A lot of people still are, and I am hopeful that technology helps us to witness the atrocities and to say no to them and to make sure that they don't happen anymore. I hope that the world is watching and the world cares, and that it will change things. And I think even when I was a teenager in the 90s, like, you didn't have cameras everywhere and things happened all the time that nobody ever knew about. And the unfortunate part is when things are recorded and shared that shouldn't be, but when there's a recording of things that are happening and there's proof and nobody can deny what's happening, it started all these conversations about, the roots of racism in Canada and the racism in the prime ministers of the past, and it's built right into, how First Nations were treated and how women have been treated and how minorities have been treated. And I think there's so much discussion right now about all these bad things, and I think that it's not discouraging, it's cleansing, it's healing, it's important. Like, we have to acknowledge what's happened and we have to be honest about it, and then we can do it differently and we can do it better. And so I think it's a good thing. I think that most people are good and most people don't want to see anybody hurt, and there's so few people that are really bad, that really are that malicious and abusing power the way the police officer, for example, did. And I think that we're just going to have to all be more accountable, because there is video surveillance and there is the internet, and you can share stories, and people are horrified. People are devastated to see that kind of crime happen. And I don't think anybody wants that. So I feel like we can't lie about things. We can't pretend that they're not happening. They're happening. We see it. And I think we're going to do something about it. I think that things are getting better, and it's up to those of us that have a good life and that have freedom and have nourishment and have peace to lift everybody up and to be good and to say, what are we going to do to make the world better? Do the little things around you that you can see, like share with your neighbors, appreciate your neighbors, take care, show some concern for children and elderly people and people in need, and help the community, and just try to make things better and safer and healthier. Try to take care of yourself too. I think if we take care of ourselves, then we can be better for other people. I think a lot of our pain as humankind comes from self-loathing and self-abuse and depression and anxiety. So we got to remedy that. We got to eat fruits and vegetables. We got to spend time at the beach. We got to go for a hike. We got to play some disc golf. We got to do some fun stuff. I think that's a pretty good prescription for better life for you and better life for other people. I guess I've been thinking a little bit about how do I want my life to look like when I'm at the end of my life. Having just lost my mom, I think, what do I want to feel when I get to the end? And I just want to feel brave, because I am afraid of things. I'm afraid of being judged or failing at things, or just to share my opinion or express myself about things. And so I'm just trying to push myself, to do things even if I don't want to. If I know it's for my growth and betterment, then I should rise to the challenge and try, I don't really know how to express it. I'm just thinking that when I get to the end of my life, I want to feel like I enjoyed it and I appreciated it and I did the best that I could with it. And so my question is just, as I'm going along, am I doing my best? Am I trying? Am I living up to my responsibilities? Am I putting good things in the world instead of negativity? Am I being accountable? Am I telling the truth? That's a hard one sometimes, And am I thinking the best of people rather than believing that they had bad intentions? Am I making allowances that people might forget things sometimes or make honest mistakes? Am I being as nice to the people I love as I could be? Trying to not let grumpy grown-up responsibilities get the best of me and be snappish when it's a good life and it should be appreciated as much as possible. Am I doing my best? Because I feel like there's an undercurrent to life that's telling me where I should be or what I should be doing to feel good and to feel like I'm doing my best. And I want to tune into that and do the best job that I can of this. Like, this is amazing, right? This blessed life with 2 children that I love and a really fun and supportive husband and a beautiful island and a gorgeous community, birds singing, trees all around us. Like, to land here, I feel like I've got to be thankful. I've got to say, this is a good life. Thank you so much, universe, God, I don't know what. and just grow some more love and share it around.
Paul Widdershoven. I see right now, I wondered what I could do and make an effect during this situation. And what came to me was that people's names are so important. And I recognized that when people called me by name, when they said Paul in the sentence of greeting, there was I don't know, there was warmer. So what I did consciously is that I drive for Southridge once or twice a week and stop at 10 or so places. And I made a point of learning people's names, their first names. And from the moment I asked if I could know their name, everything changed. The conversations naturally, without effort, deepened. They were more willing to share what felt like it was an intimate conversation versus a random one with a customer at the counter. And that has been sort of my focus during this, to do something consciously to make a contribution. And it's given me what has been sort of what denied over the last couple of months, is deep connections with people just going through the community, because everybody wants to stay far away. But I started using first names, and then those conversations became more than they were before. Well, life for me is not a whole lot different. But I recognize that it has been very stressful for a lot of people. And my focus has been on those people so that I don't minimize the discomfort or fear that they have. Yeah, I honor that, but at the same time, I want to stay consistent with where I am. And to me, having my primary focus on the other, it's been a gift to me. As it relates to the virus, in a physical, health-threatening situation, life is the same. It really hasn't changed. We live on our boat. It's not that we feel that we need to be isolated, but we naturally are. But the challenge for me has been being swallowed by the need to find a bad guy. The concept of killing the virus to me is insanity. It just is I think fighting against something has never proven to be, nobody wins that war. But also there's these conspiracy theories. I love the idea of finding a bad guy. Like, the people who are doing this or the 5G, it's sort of thrilling for me. To say, okay, we defeat the bad guy, then everybody think it will be okay. But instead, that has been the challenge. But what I recognize is I was drawn into that same narrative. It may have looked a little different, but fundamentally, I've shifted out of giving power to that. And what I focus on is focusing on what I believe is truly happening. And that is the transformation of this planet, because I think it's unbelievable that the entire globe is feeling fear. And I think what we've been missing for a long time is feeling. And almost every person on this planet is sharing that. And I just think it's an amazing opportunity that is happening to us. And I'm grateful. And I'm also excited for what will be. I see the future as different, like beyond the physical. And most of my life I've been a dreamer, but the dreamer has never been about so much a physical reality versus a spiritual reality, where we come into the acceptance of who we are. And fundamentally, I think we've gone through a time that we have been encouraged to deny who we truly are. And I believe this circumstance is creating the opportunity for people to focus on what they really feel important, but really that etches into their soul in terms of what they're here to do and be. And frankly, I find that thrilling for myself, because I have also been among the masses of that denial. But now it seems to be that everything else has been somewhat removed from me, and I can sort of put a laser focus on spending time accepting that. When your need to have something change is at its height, time will speed up. There won't be enough time. And when you don't need what is to be different, or just that's your focus, to be different than it is today, you will not have enough time. So part of this time has been significant to me in this, because time feels different. And I observe that in other people, that it's a different time. But through this also recognizing that I thought I wanted the world to change to something better. What I think I've done in reverse to that is I am accepting of what is, almost totally, with no need for it to be different, but knowing that when I don't need it to change, it opens the door for that. Why am I not caught up? Why do I feel so comfortable in this situation where so many people aren't? I look around and I'm surprised that I've not been engulfed by the fear. But I have a fundamental principle in which I look at life. I believe there is in the universe that thing that nobody wants anybody to talk about, and that is God. And I feel that God represents a benevolence. And what I am here to be is to be the fullest expression of that God. And that essence is always working in support of me. So now when I look at this situation, I trust that we are moving to something, to a time, to a world, that there is more freedom to be that expression. I trust that. And I look through that lens, and it gives me peace every single day. I don't need it to be more. I don't need it to be different. And then at the same time, I know it's changing at a deep, deep level.
All right. Well, big thank you to Emma, Matthew, Nikki, and Paul for doing those interviews. Super appreciative that they agreed to do it without knowing what the results were going to be. So thank you again. And an extra special thanks to Nikki. I'm so happy she agreed to do it because she is the person I first heard ask the question, where are you putting your love? My wife and I were at Roe Lake and we ran into Nikki one day and she asked us that question in regards to something I can't remember at the moment, but I just thought it was such an incredible question. So that's it for this one. And if anybody out there is interested in doing an interview in this series, you can contact me at my email. That's chriswakaluk@hotmail.com. I put it in the show notes, but I can spell it out for you here. It's CHRISWAKALUK. So if you want to reach out, I'd love to hear other people's experiences on the island. And if you get a hold of me, we'll see what we can do. Anyway, thank you for listening. Be well, everyone. Until next time.